Good evening and welcome to the Monday, September 18th, 2023 Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting of the Akron Public Schools. Thank you for anyone who is joining us out there, and thank you for folks who are here in attendance in person. At this time, we will go ahead and jump in and get started on our agenda. Item 1.01, our previous meeting summary. And so if there are any additions or corrections to that, now would be a good time. And if there is none, we will accept these as presented to us from our Chief Financial Officer. Anything? Seeing none, we will accept them as presented to us. Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson, and we will go ahead and move right on into our agenda. Item 2.01, finance topic of the meeting is types of levies. Exciting stuff, important and relevant.
So what you'll find is the agenda just flows through on the PowerPoint, and you probably are getting used to the fact that I always have a PowerPoint because it serves as my notes, essentially. But I think it also helps to have a visual as well. So we'll talk about types of levies, addressing levy questions. These are actual comments, not so much questions, but comments that were just a Mile High View handpicked group that basically said what I saw repeatedly on social media. And then I want to take the opportunity to address those questions or those comments, because I think it helps those people who wrote them have a better understanding, but also for us to have a better understanding of, well, what do you say when someone says that? What is the response when someone says that to you when you're out in the community? Are we in a defensible position? Are we in an indefensible position? And we're in a defensible position, by the way. And then our 5-year forecast, which we've covered, but as I have previously mentioned, Monday's board meeting, you'll be asked to approve, which is a little early, approve that 5-year forecast, so that when we move on October 10th and 11th to present at S&P, have a board-approved 5-year forecast. But there'll be a commitment that we'll need to ascertain in order to make sure that I'm presenting the right 5-year forecast to you on Monday, and then ultimately to S&P. So types of levies, there's more than the types of levies that I'm going to go over, but these are the levies these are the main levies that you would consistently see. They're historically what you would see here in Akron Public Schools, and they're in what you'd see predominantly across the state of Ohio. So, but before we get there, what is a property tax levy? It's a tax levy, collection of taxes charged on the value of someone's property. So obviously, businesses pay a different dollar amount. Someone who lives in a $100,000 house pays a different number than someone who lives in $1 million house, for example. The mathematical calculation stays the same, but it varies based on your total property valuations. So all school boards, when they go to put any type of levy on the ballot, are required to have 2 resolutions passed. The first one's a resolution of necessity, which kind of says what it is. It's saying it's your proclamation that there's a need, and this is what the need is. And then the second one, at a separate board meeting, can't be the same board meeting, can't be on the same night, has to be a separate night, is our resolution to proceed. And these have to be done 100 days before, in this case, March 19th, if in fact our decision is to be on the ballot in March. So generally speaking, school districts have 2 shots at levies, which is the May or March primary, and then the November primary or general election, depending on the status. There is an option for a third one, but that's when you're in an emergency status, and that comes in August. So that's not a situation that we're in. So our two options are spring, March, May, or November for the foreseeable future. So those big three levy types that exist, they're all predicated on a mill. And I think this is probably the most misunderstood word that's out there. Most people, even when I was a principal, I remember thinking a mill must stand for $1 million. And a lot of people think that a mill does not stand for $1 million. A mill is a value for expressing the rate of property taxes in the state of Ohio. So the formula is the same in every school district, but the dollar amount collected per mill is not the same at all. It varies wildly. So a mill is 0.1% of the total property valuation in the entire school district, not the value of our buildings, the value of every home, every business in this district is 0.1%, and a mill generates approximately $3 million in our community. So if we seek 7 mills, $21 million. Now, it's also important to remember this March or this November, collections don't begin until January of 2024 if we were to pass that levy. Or, I'm sorry, no. Yeah, I'm sorry, 25. I'm sorry, yes, see, it's so confusing. 25. They wouldn't begin to be received, and then it would only be a half collection because a fiscal year is to July to the end of June. A calendar year, of course, we know what a calendar year is, so we're only actually making collections for half the year. It wouldn't matter if you pass in March or you pass in November of 24, you're still going to get a half collection beginning in January. So it all really lags behind. So when you're looking at that 5-year forecast, you've got to remember it's going to lag all the way until the next year before you get a half collection, and then you get a full collection. So it really makes it more incumbent upon us to be looking forward, looking ahead, and planning on that reality. So again, a mill is 0.1% of our total property valuation.
Dr. Thompson, I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at that definition you gave us, are you stating that the total value of all of our properties in the district combined is what it's based on? Mm-hmm. So they take every business property, residential property,
that's right,
and whatever the total value of that collectively
is how then you apply that mathematical formula to it, and it would be the same in any school district, but the math is going to come out different in almost every single. Like Columbus is going to collect a lot more than $3 million. Cuyahoga Falls is going to collect a lot less than $3 million just because of the size of their community.
Thank you.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just signaling to the chairwoman of the committee that I was going to want to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So to that point, I mean, like that. So that explanation largely forms the basis for why we have the DeRolf decisions. You know, because of the disparity in the size of the tax base from community to community, going back to the 90s.
Yeah, there's a lot of inequities that go. I think the inequities mostly generate out of not just what a mill generates, although that can certainly play a role in it, but some communities are more than willing to pay a high tax base, a very high tax base, and another community might say, no, we're not going to do that, and so the unfortunate part is that would leave that school district with a lot less funds than the next to the school district right next to it, and that creates this inequity in how many resources, how many computers, anything you can think of that might be available to students, programming, course options, all of that is all driven based off what you can afford.
Yeah.
And some communities are willing to put that forward and other communities aren't.
Yeah. And to that point, So yeah, so again, so the basis for DeRolf, as I recall, was just that disparity in property taxes.
That's right.
So the fact that really the court has said that our over-reliance upon property taxes and how we fund schools, that's the major cog in the unconstitutional wheel that they've been rolling over us with for 20 some odd years. The other comment I had though was, so I know that I know that a lot of us recently have gotten new assessments on our homes. Mm-hmm. And so some people's go up, some people go down, but and so I know that the $3 million number is I know that's an approximate, could be 2.8, 2.9, whatever it is, but so I'd be curious to see, once you have that intel, with the recently completed assessments where we're at. 'Cause I know that there was a downward turn. So had we passed the levy 3 or 4 years ago, what we'd have collected would have been less than what I think we would collect now.
That is correct.
So I'd be curious to see sort of where we're like, if you're able, and that's probably the fiscal office is.
That's a county auditor question.
Yeah.
But it most certainly will be more than what we have historically collected.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm glad we'll come back to that because I think that brings up a whole another important point that we'll get to when we get to the questions. But so when looking at what kind of levies there are, and there are attachments here. There's an attachment which talks about. It's on. It's on your. Under the first one, but understanding school levies. This puts it all there for you as well, along with the PowerPoint. So I tried to add some documents just for your education. But a general operating levy is exactly what it sounds like. It is to pay for district costs for operating. And those include. A lot of people ask, well, you spend all your money on salaries. Which is 80% of our budget is salary and benefits. Well, of course it is, because we're a service industry. We don't make widgets. We don't make a product. We don't sell a product. So as a service industry, of course the majority of our expenditures are going to be in people, because that's what drives our engine. But they can also be in equipment, and they can also be, you can also make permanent improvements out of a general operating levy as well. Let's say we were going to take a look at Kent Roosevelt property down the road. If we chose to, we could use general operating dollars to build or construct something that's permanent, like an additional football stadium for the schools that don't have a football stadium, for example. Not proposing that, I'm just using that as an example. Buses. A second one is a bond issue, which you're familiar with. That's more narrow in scope, and that is to pay solely for new facilities. So while a building or athletic facilities could be built out of general operating, when you put a bond issue, you're telling the community, this is the only place these dollars will be spent. So it's very specific in nature, and most school districts have bond issues at some point or another in the history of their schools. And then the last one that we commonly use, which would have to be a consideration, could be a consideration in March or November if we choose to be on the ballot, and that would be for PI levy, and that's meant, again, solely to fund permanent improvements. But that would be the funding stream if we were to take a look at North High School in addition to our current building plans. So I think you can see from the 5-year forecast the notion of taking out an additional $80 million in COPS would be financially, in my opinion, beyond risky.
Deleterious?
Yeah, that would be a good word. Yes. So I'm certainly not proposing that, but that would be something we could take a look at if we could generate the revenue stream to pay for it. So any questions about what I've covered up to this point?
So On those three different types you mentioned there, Dr. Thompson, can you only pick one? You can't do more than one of those at a time.
There's different ones you could package together. So you can package, you can package some of them together. You could split them out. So in other words, you could do a general operating and a PI levy. Yeah. You could package them together as one vote, for example. So you can put more options on the ballot if you choose to.
Got it. Okay.
I had a similar. Was going to. Oh, this is where I was going here. Okay, so just in transparency's sake, I've gotten a number of questions last week in response to the ABJ article that Ms. Pignolet published after our board retreat. A number of folks now have this perception, or this belief that the district is currently in dire financial straits. And so when we get to the meeting on Monday, I'm going to ask you to address that directly. I'll have some commentary about it in my president's report as well. But the short version of this being that we are not in dire financial straits. So I've seen this on social media now. It's all over the place. School board, school districts in dire financial straits. What's going on? And it's now made its way into now you've got candidates for school board now that this is becoming a school board campaign issue that I've seen on social media that candidates are now leveraging to support their candidacies. Well, they got to come in and save the school board because we're in dire financial straits. So it's really unfortunate, that narrative is now, been amplified and it's propagating with at the speed of light. It feels like. So I want to make sure that in Monday's board meeting that we address that head on, because as we walk through in our board retreat the varying scenarios, one thing that I thought was crystal clear was that we had a conservatively 3 years of runway, and really it was in year 4 and then especially in year 5 from now where we really need to make sure that we've done some things in the next couple of years to make sure that we're avoiding the huge negative deficits that we'd be facing by year 5. So we're not in dire straits today, we're not broke today, but as a district we're trying to be proactive in putting in place solutions that avoid us being 5 years out from now at a huge deficit spend in that number, right? So but I think people are conflating and saying, oh my gosh, so that's unfortunate. So I want to make sure that I'm going to spend most of my remarks on Monday talking about that, but again I'd ask that you address it as well. Sure. And I don't say anything that me saying this is not to I'm not being critical of the reporting by Ms. Pignolet. I'm simply saying I think it was taken in a way that it wasn't intended by a lot of folks. It's been seized upon. So it's now becoming this issue. So I want to make sure that we can clearly and articulately sort of address that head on. Yeah. Like this is the reality that we're in today, and we're talking about being proactive. So we're looking 4, 5, 6 years out. Absolutely, which is a responsible thing to do. But we're not sitting here in dire straits today, and neither next year or the year after that. But at the same time, I think it does make sense for us to have the levy conversation because that's a part of the long-term solution to avoiding being in a difficult spot, 5 years out from now.
I would agree, and I believe the language that I used was that I did not feel that we were in a position to panic. We are not. I think we can make some responsible moves that really solidify the budget, which we'll talk a little bit about today. I do think that being fiscally responsible means right-sizing your district, for example, as you have declining student enrollment and doing some of those things. And I also think that people operate in numbers that they're used to. Most people don't work in corporate America where they might be dealing with $300, $400, $500, $600 million budgets. They deal with the budgets of their household. So when they hear $15 million, to include our own teaching staff, we panic. $15 million is 4% of our budget. 4%. most of 4% can be can be picked off just through attrition. So it is not a situation where we have to go into a significant reduction in force. But you've seen the slide, and I'll show it once again, that illustrates we do need to right-size our staff. And that's, again, just the responsible thing to do. It doesn't mean reduction in programming. It means that we have too many staff members. That's what it means, and I think the data illustrates that. And not right-sizing your staff is being irresponsible with taxpayer money. I think it's also important to remember, this is the most critical piece, and I'll address it as we answer some of these levy questions, but I'll get to it just shortly. So these are just some of the comments that I found on social media. Didn't pick them all by any stretch, but this one jumped out at me. Our local property taxes just jumped up. Tighten your belts, APS. I'm voting no. Okay, so what do you say when someone says that? Well, did property taxes just jump up? Yes, they did. They did. Did they jump up for APS? No, they did not. And why did they not jump up for APS? House Bill 920. We are not generating any additional revenue. In addition, when property values were increased by 22% for the Akron community, the state views that as, well, you can pay more of your local share because your property taxes are worth more. And while that might be true, because of House Bill 920, we're not receiving any additional dollars, but in the state formula, we're being reduced dollars predicated on that increased property value. So it's a perfect storm against our district. I don't believe intentional. And tightening our belts, what do we know? School districts are on the ballot how often on average in Ohio?
Every 4 years, was it?
Every 4.5 years in Ohio. We're at 13 and counting, folks. 13 and counting. So what does the evidence suggest? The evidence suggests that the district has been fiscally responsible. The evidence does suggest that we have stretched our dollars, and we need to continue to do that. So that's how I would respond to this person's thoughts. They probably think, well, you got a bunch more money. Taxes went up.
Well,
what's your problem?
And to that point, this is not an issue. This is not a class issue where people who are less educated don't understand this.
No.
I was at a community gathering in where I live at just a couple of days, actually last Monday, actually, and talked to a group of gentlemen who were attorneys, tax accountants, physicians, and I'm explaining that to them, like, hey, like I was explaining House Bill 920 to them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea.
No.
So that's where, again, I mean, we have a lot of, and this is where I like to see us partner with, publications like the Akron Beacon Journal and IdeaStream to help us tell that story, because, I think it's, you like to see the fourth estate, contribute to getting, an accurate narrative and painting an accurate picture that educates as well as informs, right? So, so we've got to get with Mark, our marketing people, and make sure that we're talking with the local news outlets to make sure that they understand, like, hey, like, let's tell the House Bill 920 story.
Yep.
So in part, among other things.
Yeah, and I think just as a reminder, I think we can say it too many times for somebody who might be watching. And I do understand that since I've been making these presentations, ratings we're up to like 7 people now. So it's, who knows where we could be? We could be at 10 next week. Who knows? But House Bill 920, passed in 1976, freezes collections at the same dollar amount in perpetuity forever when it was passed. So it would be paramount to you getting a job for $25 an hour today and then 10, 13 years later, you're still making $25 an hour. And that's exactly what it's like for us as a public institution.
I just want to also add for those 7 to 10 that might be listening, in order to change that, that requires a constitutional change. Is that correct?
That's correct. House Bill 920 is now baked into the Ohio Constitution. So to change or amend that can be done, but it takes a lot more. That is very true. Second one I picked up, you guys are always asking for more money as you continue to waste it. You know, and that's a more difficult one to respond to, other than to say there are a significant amount of evidence to suggest, after going 13 years and counting, that we have stayed within our means and managed our budget. So Todd Atkins over there, for example, Todd puts all our budgets together, and when someone wants to go over that budget, there's a conversation between the two of us before we even begin to move on allowance of that budgetary variance. You know, and if it's something like a roof gets blown off in a storm, well, that's one thing. But we're very diligent about holding to those budgets and holding people accountable to those budgets. So the notion that we're wasting money isn't borne out in the facts. Our taxes go up every year. Do a better job managing your money, APS. That's true. Your taxes can go up every single year. But remember, because of House Bill 920, they haven't gone up because of the schools in 13 years. I challenge you. I challenge anybody out there to find a school district that's gone longer. You'd be hard-pressed to find it.
Yeah.
And last, make your schools safer, and maybe kids wouldn't leave the district. Get it together, APS. We know that as students leave, as part of the funding formula, we lose dollars, and that's a fact. But what's also a fact that I think is being misunderstood or misrepresented, yeah, we have lost a lot of students. 36,000 students in the early 2000 to where we're at today at about 19,700 or so, right around in there. But the city has gone from 300,000 residents to 190,000 residents in that time frame. And it's not just Akron, it's all of Northeast Ohio. As jobs have left, so leave people. Now, the safer schools, I can tell you that I firmly believe what we put in place last year has significantly improved the safety in our classrooms. The teachers, I strongly believe, will echo that. And I'm encouraging, and I would ask the board to encourage union leadership. When they felt it wasn't safe, they came and told you. Now we need them to come and tell you that it is a different scenario. And we need that to be played out in the media as much as it was played out when the perception was that it wasn't. Yeah. To the point where our team presented at the Big 8, which is all the large urban schools coming together, and now they are coming to APS to see how we're doing security now. We've gone from maybe some lack in safety and security to leading I think the state in comprehensive safety and security layered protocols and procedures. But it takes time for that to resonate out in the community as well. We spent a lot of time telling them it was unsafe. Now we need to spend double the amount of time telling them that they are safe, because in fact they are.
Well, it just makes the point that schools don't pass levies, communities pass levies.
That's correct.
Right? It's a community lift. So every stakeholder has a part to play in ensuring that happens. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that we keep saying, ad nauseum, ad infinitum, is that as APS goes, so goes the city of Akron. Well, damn. If we all really believe that, then we should all have no problem, rallying around the support of a levy, especially when in light of the things that we just, especially in light of what we've just discussed today. Yeah. But we've all got to do a better job, this board, our stakeholders, of telling, of getting the story straight and telling the truth and getting it out there. We're also going to rely upon the fourth estate to help us do that too. Because they're also stakeholders in this community too, right? So, because nobody's buying papers and nobody's clicking on ads if people don't have the money to do either, and don't have an interest in reading what's there, right? I mean, so we all have an interest in making sure that we're, telling the right story, and to be fair, a lot of the folks who work for our papers, and they live in this community too, or have family members that do too, right? So we all have a vested interest in getting the truth out there into people's hands, So in a way that a lay person can understand, and I think that's the other part of it too. Like we want to make sure that lay people can understand it, and they're not going to read, probably less likely to read a super lengthy article. So the challenge becomes, how do we boil this down to really distill our response down to talking points, that address some of the things that you just put up here. So we've got some talent in house, Mr. Williamson and whatnot, and if we need to, work with a different company to help support us in creating that language, then I think this board should be open to supporting that. Anyway, so those are just my comments.
Yes, ma'am.
My mic is on. My mic's on, right? Okay, I want to make sure. I think you made some very great points, Dr. Thompson, because when you talk about 300,000, a population of 300,000, it goes down to about 100,000. I think the thing that we need to examine as a community is the bringing of industry back, corporation back into our city, and what does that look like to bring people not only here, but so that our graduates also remain here with jobs that can sustain lifestyles that they desire, with entertainment and things within the city that makes people want to be in Akron. Safer communities, engaging activities for family and nightlife, but also industry. And I think when we look at partnerships and when we're talking about college and career pathways, that to get back to, we are the rubber city. We are a city of industry, and those type of partnerships, those global partnerships, those community partnerships is what rings in my mind when you say things like that, and when you say, collectively, we're all in this together. Because if you own property, as I always say, if you own property in Akron, if you live in Akron, if you have business in Akron, then you have skin in the game for what comes out of Akron schools and the success of Akron schools. So it's almost like a given that you must support a levy, but also that they have something to say about what we're doing, because they have skin in the game. So we can't close our ears to the community, what they're saying, our community partners. Like, we really need to all reason together, because we are better together. And if we want to elevate Akron, that's what it looks like. We cannot work in silos and in secrecy, or everyone's talking about change. But what does that look like? And what's the action plan? Because I know as a board member, I'm so tired of people talking about what not going to happen and how it all, well, what are we doing to, what is the action plan? And so I can land this plane, you guys are always asking for more money as you continue to waste it. I actually had some interesting conversation with individuals, and I don't know if anyone can speak to this, or this is something that may need to be addressed, where they're making comments about APS purchasing things, air conditioning units, and things that they purchase that ends up in a storage unit. That it's all these brand new, these things that thousands and thousands of dollars have been spent on materials and things that are in some storage unit somewhere. So that's not being fiscally responsible, if this in fact is true. Not sure where this information is coming from, but it was a varied audience who were making these statements, some former employees of the district, former employees of the district, and current employees of the district and community members. So when people are making these statements, I'm a board member, and if I was privy to this conversation, then it's people in the community. So that would be a lens of saying, y'all not physically responsible, you are wasting money. And so I think we need that transparency and being a good steward, that if that's the fact, if there are storage units somewhere around this city where we have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of things, then we need to address how can we liquidate and make that cash. And if that's the case, because like I said, these are just the things that some people are stating in the community. So when they're making comments like that, I can see that being someone who may be privy to such conversations as well. Additionally, and I think you addressed this, about being top-heavy administratively. Like, this is a crazy number, like 5 people doing the same job. Or y'all got 5 people doing jobs that can be consolidated to 2. Things like that.
You know, and I can tell you that we have a few storage facilities, and I've been in them, and almost anything that's in there is just essentially scrap. It's old filing cabinets that we would be better served to scrap. And we have been doing that. We've been closing those facilities. So this notion that somehow we have hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment that we don't use just stored isn't fact-based. I can tell you that. You know, we stopped, for example, the air conditioning units. We stopped our order that were going to go to Firestone Park to be fiscally responsible. We could have gone ahead and put them in and said, here you go. They would have been happy. They wouldn't have come to a board meeting and complained. Parents would have been happy for that year. But would have that been the fiscally responsible thing to do? No, we'd have to pull them out of that and then actually put them in storage to be used in what building? Because most of our buildings are air conditioned. So, you know, but that's probably, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. Usually there's some thread of something that starts a rumor, and that was probably the thread that started it. But we didn't receive those air conditioners. They're not sitting in some storage unit somewhere.
And just may I say, because when I hear things like that, those Firestone Park, the teachers, the families, those are our customers. And see, this is the thing when I talk about school choice, is I'm glad people have a choice. Because when they don't, then people deal with people any kind of way because they don't have a choice. When you understand someone is your customer and their children are in a room when it's like 90-something degrees, I agree with you. I don't know which units that you bought, but I know they have those portable units that are very, like we talk about 15 million being 4% of our budget. I can imagine just a few of those portable units at about $200-something a piece. And then if you talk about bulk sale, because I'm the gritty type, so I like to thrift and I look for deals and I bargain, that when it's our kids, that this is what I would be looking at. And then I wouldn't worry, I'm not worried about them going in the storage unit. Why? Because APS has closeout sales for things that we don't need. And so we open it up. And if we pay a little bit money for an auctioneer or someone, people are coming to buy those portable units that owns apartment buildings or other charter schools. So it's a way to make money. It's just about we talk about being innovative and, you know, doing things in a different way. We have to think from that lens because we have to be mindful. Then it's those families that feel disrespected that then go to another school because they felt unheard, or you didn't care about my kid being in 90-something degree weather, or teachers, when we're talking about teacher retention, teachers feeling unheard and disrespected because they voiced something at a board meeting. We're their board. We're for it. I am. I'm going to say I'm their board because I'm for the people, by the people, on the people's shoulders is why I'm in the seat. So I want the teachers to come, and I want them to say what's wrong because I don't want sidebar conversations, politicking with all the people who have positions. I want the people that's on the ground to tell me, how can I work for you? Student and teacher. It's all cool for the leaders and all that to get together. Student, teacher, period. How can I help you? Because that's who we're all should be working for, and that's whose all backs we're on at the end of the day, because no one at this place has a job with no kids. And so everybody want to rah-rah about school choice and not treat your people right. Treat your teachers right. They have a voice. They can come here and complain if they want to. If it's a problem, they should complain. And we should seek to fix the problem, expose that it's not like what you're saying. We didn't even order air conditioners, so they're not. But that story needs to be made plain and clear. But their voice, we need to understand and say your voice should be heard, and you need to come to a board meeting because it almost seems like this is the best platform for them to come without being shut down, and no one ever hears the real issue.
Well, I
Thank
think
you, Ms. Jackson.
Yeah, I think as Dr. Thompson, McWilliams, Madam Chairwoman, I think as Dr. Thompson kind of laid out, why we've done a lot the last 4 years to be much more transparent and available to the district. I won't count the ways in which we've done that in this meeting. But folks, we don't have great ratings, to your point, right? I'm not here to point a finger and say blame people for not watching board meetings. People out there working 2 and 3 jobs and have time to sit and watch a 2-hour board meeting, 3-hour board meeting. I get it, and that's why we're saying that's where the marketing piece. We keep coming back to marketing. Because I think, at least I did this. There was a point at which where, I was all too ready to pat myself on the back about live streaming everything and making it easier to address the board. And I thought, well, gosh, now no one now there can be no excuse for why people don't know what's going on. But then you forget, that person who's working that second shift job, when are they gonna watch a board meeting? So, and that's a lot of our families, right? And so, so that's where we really have to figure out the marketing piece. Like, how do we get literature or mailers or commercials or billboards, something, right? Messaging that's more complex that reaches people that don't have, because watching these board meetings, that's a luxury. That's a luxury that most folks don't have. So we got to figure out the messaging piece.
And puts me a bit of an awkward position, but we have 19 minutes, so I want to make sure we get through this information, guys. So just quickly, important dates to remember: that primary date, which we've talked about, November 6th, we would need to move on the necessity, and then the 27th to proceed. So perhaps we need to take a hard look at an agenda item or an executive session or something for Monday for you to make a decision about what you want to do. And then important steps, because look at all the things that we need to do to proceed. We've got to appoint levy chair, engage fundraising. There's a lot that needs to take place in order to even have a puncher's chance at getting this information out to the community. I have always said, in my experience as a school administrator, the greatest challenge of all of it is, how do you effectively communicate? That is the greatest challenge. It's not all these other things. It is, how do you effectively communicate? And it's a challenge. So I'm going to keep right on rolling and go into the 5-year forecast, if you don't mind. So there are 4 scenarios. You've seen them already. These are not new. I have a scenario that I would ask you to be committed to, but it requires a commitment from the board to make reductions. So again, it's 4% is what we're asking for, 4%, but you can see what a difference it makes. Again, you've seen this before. Dr. Robinson's well aware of this. I know that his side of the curriculum side understands it. I think everybody understands where we're at. So to reduce this by 4% is, again, most could in large part be picked off through attrition and other means that would highly unlikely lead to any significant reduction in force. So May 5-year forecast to take a look at, again, where it says ending cash balance. Remember that minus 40 million is 2027. So keep that in mind as we flip and add another year, 28, as we move forward. But probably the most important part is to take a look at that deficit spending. Again, deficit spending is unavoidable in the way Ohio public schools are funded. It's boom and bust cycles. You pass a levy to collect more dollars than you know you're going to need immediately. Why is that? Because you're building cash reserves, because you know you're frozen at that $25 an hour salary forever. If you knew that, if you knew your salary was frozen right now for the next 10 years, would you not start saving more money than you would have normally? You'd have to, right? Either that or you're going to go bankrupt. Yeah, you find another job, right. So our find another job is pass a levy. And again, we haven't done that for 13 years. So this is May. That's what's in ODE. So again, all scenarios moving forward, this is the base that stays the same on every scenario moving forward. Those ESSER expenditures coming back to general fund, the cuts that you all collectively made with Dr. Caver and Mrs. Outley, includes reductions based on closing the Firestone Park and the ELP buildings in fiscal year 25, updated revenue on most recent conversations regarding property values and aid. While it overall helped us, but remember that 22% increase in residential values, we were at 3% was our historic number. So to jump from 3% to 22%, while that increased people's taxes in many ways, not to public education because of House Bill 920, and then 5% for commercial properties. It assumes a declining student enrollment, includes $30 million in ESSER supplant back into general fund, and these are repeated throughout each scenario moving forward with some additional pieces which I'll add. So without that, just doing just that, no reductions in force, no preventative measures, 27, now remember, 27 on our May forecast is minus 40 million. So to go from minus 40 million to that's a $43 million swing. That's what the new state funding formula helped us do. But you can see just the additional dollars in state funding does not carry us in perpetuity. It doesn't carry us, like Dr. Hall said, fiscal year 24 is over $100 million. Fiscal year 25 is $76 million. 26 is $44 million estimated. But remember, in order to fix 27 with only $3 million, you got to go the fiscal year previous to that and only get a half collection on that levy starting in January. So you really have to back yourself up a little bit more than what intuitively you might think is the answer. But to say that we're in fiscal distress, not right now. But if we do nothing, it's imminent. So scenario 2 is the added debt payments on our debt schedule. It's adding the COPS deal. That's what this does. So remember, again, just to take a look, 27's $3 million to the good, and 28's minus $46 million. Add the debt, and the $3 million to the good from 27 becomes minus $5 million, and the 28 goes to $57 million. That's the debt payments is what's causing that. Assumption 3 is the added debt payments on the schedule and an additional $15 million in permanent cuts in fiscal year 25. 4%. 4%. And that $57 million deficit in 28 becomes a $2.3 million carryover. I think it's still saying at some point we're levy imminent. Maybe not. Would we have to be on in March? No. Would we have to be on in November? No. Could you choose to be on in March and November? Yes. But you wouldn't necessarily have to. There is no, if we just make 4% permanent budgetary reductions we stabilize and move forward with our COPS deal. We've stabilized the district for a black forecast for 5 years. Again, I would challenge you to go on the ODE website. You won't find of the 614 school districts, you won't find more than 100 of those school districts that are black through 5 years.
So just clarifying question, not actual question. Scenario 3, I missed the last slide. Scenario 3, this assumes we did pass a levy?
No, this is
Right.
no levies. There's no scenario on here with a levy.
Yep.
These are all non-levied scenarios.
I'd love to see this scenario with a levy, assuming a past levy in '24.
The only reason I didn't model that is what I need us to do is to pick a scenario so that I can build out the rest of this forecast and have it on the agenda for Monday. And S&P is not going to allow us to say they're not going to accept a levy or accept a 5-year forecast that has a levy pass as in the scenario. So that's why it's not modeled.
Okay, gotcha. And that makes sense.
Dr. I'm confused then. What were you saying? With this is without levies, but you have an ending cash balance at the bottom there with levies. So am I the only one
Well,
confused?
with the
on
levies
what-
that we currently have.
Okay, that's
No,
what.
no
Okay, that's where the
additional
confusion
levies.
might be.
Yeah,
then.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause
no
looking at that, I
additional
would think
levies.
you're.
This is no additional
Okay.
levy. This is just
Yeah.
with what we have currently on the books 13 years ago and historic before that.
Perhaps we should adjust it to make sure that the public knows that's what we're talking about. Because
Okay.
They may read that and think that's, with a levy,
I will
levy
definitely.
passing. Yeah.
I mean, this language is not my language. This is the language that's ODE language to submit.
Okay.
But I'll make sure that I explain that. That ending cash balance with levies is not a new levy.
Yeah. Even if we just put current levies or whatever.
Yeah,
we might.
we-
What about just striking that language, period, just say ending cash balance?
I can do that.
Just put a line through it.
Yeah,
Because
I
trying to
can
explain
do,
levies and
I can fix
non-levies,
that.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I want this as simple as possible for the layperson.
I can do that. I can do that. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Sometimes when you're doing this and you look at it every day, you don't see it exactly the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, I knew what it meant. You guys didn't? So scenario 4, again, I want to go back to get those numbers in your head. Remember, 27's 40 million, 28 is 2.3 million. So scenario 4 is no debt. In other words, no COPS issuance. And you can see the difference that it makes. So what I am recommending is that we build off scenario 3, but I need a commitment from you that that's what we're doing. It also makes a difference on if there's going to be any change at all, excuse me, any change at all to the Kenmore build. If there's going to be any change, that needs to be discussed and determined quickly. If there's going to be any reshaping, resizing, or anything of that nature, or it's going to stay exactly as is. It probably won't make a difference in the COPS issuance, but what it could make a difference in is, remember, this is also predicated on a $13 million transfer from the general fund into the building project. So that, depending on what we did, if you choose to look at it, I can run some scenarios there to give you some better idea of what that could look like, but that would be the only difference. And remember, that's just a one-time expenditure. 13 million would be, I don't know, 3%, one time 3%. Again, you hear 13 million and you think, oh, we got to do something about that. That's such a large amount of money. And while it is, it's still a small percent of our total budget, and it's not a yearly impact. It's a one-time. It's not a compounding number. So.
Well, I can tell you right now, I'll be advocating passionately for scenario 3.
That's
yeah.
what I need to,
I'd
if
like
you
to hear
could,
from my
if you
colleagues on
guys,
this, but-
I have to have a scenario completed and on the budget or on the board agenda for Monday. So, for what that's worth. And then, but this
scenario 3 represents.
This is also a commitment from the board that you're going to support a 4% reduction in our expenditures. That doesn't necessarily mean staffing.
Yeah.
It could come in other areas too, a combination of areas, but it would be an understanding that we have to right-size our district in order to make this all come together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically, as the fiscal officer, and I'm sure as the superintendent, wanting to know that we have the support to do that as we move forward.
So is that a recommendation that needs to come from this committee?
Yeah.
Today?
Well, if so, Monday is when we actually make it, but this committee has to decide whether or not we're going to make that recommendation to the larger board.
Okay.
Right now, what I have is a placeholder for a 5-year forecast on Monday's agenda, but I can't put a forecast on there until I know what scenario it is.
Yeah. Well, again, to me, scenario 3 represents staying the course that this board has already voted on previously on multiple occasions. Anything else is to me something that would have to go back to the drawing board, which I don't think at this point in time, I don't think makes any sense. I mean, I feel like we've already discussed ad nauseum the inputs. You
Want to look at 3?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, so what you're looking at is 4. This is 3.
So are there any thoughts from, I know me and I think Job are the committee officially, but
Yeah.
Just maybe to help your mind as well, I would say before 26 closes, we would need to pass a levy on this scenario, or make additional reductions in expenditures, one or the other.
Right, and to that point, that assumes we didn't try to pass one in 2024. So
That's
it buys a
correct.
couple
I'm just saying.
It buys us more time.
It buys us more time. What I'm
yeah.
saying is, I'm not saying at all that we shouldn't go now. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. But what I am saying is that in worst case scenario, there's a bit of cushion to
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah, I mean, is this the end of your presentation? I just wanted to see 3 again before we moved on from it. Do you have other slides to show, though? I know we're running out of time. Do you have other slides to show?
Slides to show on 3.
Slides, PowerPoint slides.
oh, no, he's asking, are you all done presenting? Like,
Yes,
you
I'm done.
okay.
That's, you've seen them all.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, got it.
Those 4 scenarios.
Yeah.
Good question. Yes, you've seen it all. I'm done.
So have you and the superintendent discussed? You and the superintendent, the current superintendent, has discussed the options to where he's favorable.
We've
what he's
discussed these
favorable towards.
options, and I don't want to speak for the superintendent, and he's sitting here. So if you have a question for him.
I was just asking you as the treasurer, because, if y'all collaborated, the superintendent was linked in your discussions, because that would just be the truth. It won't be speaking for him. But since he's over here, I didn't want to, because we're here in this setting, the superintendent is over there. I was just, and we don't have to address it, because when this meeting ends, I can ask him. That was just my question. Did you all discuss one where the superintendent was saying, like, oh, yeah, I think 3 is the strongest one, or these are some suggestions I have? I just wanted to know that before Monday, since we're going to be at a point of voting, I'm interested on what that part is, too, what the superintendent's insight was as well. That's all. But thank you.
Understood.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions, no.
yeah, so I would be in support of scenario 3. I am not a financial expert, but I'm here to trust the financial experts, and assuming that there was collaboration and discussion with the superintendent. So that's where I stand on it.
My thoughts exactly, Diana. I mean, we have Dr. Thompson here for a reason. We have to understand your fiscal knowledge, and you're, telling us what the best fiscally sound plan is to make. So, you know, I'm not going to go against that for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, the most fiscally sound decision would be scenario 4. But scenario 4 would be saying you're not moving forward with your build in Kenmore. And, you know, we've been through that scenario now for 8 months.
Yeah.
So you know, at least from my perspective, and then, of course, Dr. Robinson coming in much later in that piece of it, is that the board was given multiple scenarios that included no buildings, that included building north, that, you know, included a variety of recommendations. And ultimately, my job, superintendent's job, is to make recommendations, and then the board makes their decision, and we move on from it. So in terms of choosing scenario 3 over 4 was because the only direction that I've received from the school board is to continue the desire to build the Kenmore campus.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to go back on our, you know, commitment to doing that for sure. So 4 was even a non-issue for me, which is why I said 3 was the only, you know.
Yeah.
So knowing that the recommendation, or there might be an administrative recommendation or concern about building additional facilities, you've got the data, you made a decision, and we're giving you the best plan that we can based on a decision that's been made.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just one more comment as well. For the 7 to 10 people that are watching, if you're in Kenmore, you know, we strongly suggest and we want you to come and support us in this try for a levy with the same vigor you had at the meetings demanding a new school. We supported you there, and we'll continue to do that for sure. We need you out here supporting us the entire time while this levy is going to be on the table. We're going to need Kenmore big time.
I think that's well said.
Yeah,
Well said.
I agree. And obviously, this is a very different financial scenario if there's a $7 million operating levy or a $6 million
Right.
operating levy added to this. I mean, just to do the quick math, you can do the quick math, add, you know, in the first year, a half collection of, you know, $10.5 million, and then add $21 million thereafter, and you can do the math and see what the math does. We've seen the declining student enrollment. We've seen the low populations in building. All of that information's been provided. And so from my vantage point, I'm not sure how much more information as the former COO or as the current CFO that I could provide you, or that Dr. Robinson could provide you that we haven't already provided.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Are there any more comments, questions, concerns at all?
All right.
Just real quickly, I'm not going to go through these. I was going to go through them a little bit more, but I would encourage you to take a look at that. These are all attachments for you. You're going to vote on this on Monday. This is your monthly financial report. It is really an important document. And there's also a little short snapshot that you can take a look at that I pull up pretty frequently. And this is just taking that monthly report and synthesizing it into 3 columns across the top. That's an attachment for you as well. And what this is telling you right now, it is subject to change. It's early in the year. It will fluctuate. It will change, I promise you. But as of right now, overall, we're collecting almost $7.8 million more than we anticipated. So, to the good. So that's so far, and this is how we're tracking every month, knowing where do we stand fiscally. This is our reconciliation to the penny, which you have also, and then just some finance department data that I think is important for you. And then there's an updated fiscal calendar, so you know when things are going to come before you that you're going to have to vote on, so you know ahead of time. So that's all on your attachments.
Roger that.
Todd, is there anything I missed that you think I should talk about?
No, I thought you knew.
Okay. Todd's one to talk a lot. It's hard to keep him out of my office. He talks so much. Thank you, Todd. But Todd is, if you don't know this, Todd is incredibly skilled at what he does, and couldn't do this without him. Any final questions as we went 5 minutes over?
I have none.
Anything more? Okay, so thank you, everyone. I think we got a lot of good information to consider, and I'm happy to be, moving forward. Your comments about, future support from the Kenmore community and our entire community are appreciated and welcome. And I encourage folks to, you can always go back and watch the meeting and host a watch party. But for my PTA folks or folks who, are on social media with these various comments and questions, this is good information to review and become educated about our public educational entity that belongs to us. So we should take care of it. So with that being said, I will adjourn the meeting at this time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.